So for the first time in a long time, I have literally nothing to report on in terms of Apple leaks. So today I thought make some quality filler content for you guys and give you guys an opinion of mine that might be a little unpopular. And that is the fact. I think Apple should get rid of the base 13-inch MacBook Pro with M1. And yes, a lot of people are immediately going to wonder, what are you saying? How could you say such a thing? That is one of Apple's most popular Macs. Why will they get rid of it? Well, I have a few reasons, so without further ado, make sure to like and subscribe, click that bell notification, and with that being said, let's just tuck in. So before the M1 chip, and in the dark days of Intel, the base MacBook Pro made a lot of sense. Number one, Apple can flex that their Pro lineup starts at only £1,200, and that's insane value, even though the base MacBook Pro has a worse chip and less ports, but we'll gloss over that. Number two, the MacBook Air was borderline terrible. So yes, I know the Air is incredibly popular and it's beloved by many people, but let's be honest, it's popular because it's the cheapest Mac available, and the old MacBook Air used to be super underpowered and just couldn't do anything above the lightest of tasks. For example, a student or somebody who was looking to do some web browsing and that's about it, the Air made sense. But if you were looking to do video editing, photo editing, coding, music production, anything above the ordinary, you're going to struggle with the Air. And so the £300 premium for the Pro made a lot of sense to a lot of people because it was a more capable machine that you could use for intensive stuff. But of course, now the landscape has changed, the days of Intel are over, and now we have M1, and M1 has changed a few things around. So first of all, for the first time I think in a long time, the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro share the same identical chip. So you get the same M1 chip on the cheapest Mac alongside the cheapest MacBook Pro, and so there really isn't a difference in terms of performance now. Now yes, I am aware the Air is a fanless machine and the Pro has a fan, and back in the Intel days, that would have made all the difference. I mean, one expects the Air to wheeze its way through tasks and just thermal throttle in general, but because of the voodoo magic that powers the M1 chip, the difference in real life is actually quite negligible and it's just not worth paying the £300 premium for the Pro. So now you're getting the same performance in Apple's cheapest Mac. So what are you paying for when you're going for the Pro? Well, according to Apple's site, there are a few upgrades. And when I say few, I really mean few because there are only 4 changes on the Pro. And that begins with the slightly brighter display. It's 500 nits instead of 400 nits on the Air. And is that something you're going to notice in day-to-day use? I don't think so. Next is the touch bar, and the touch bar is terrible. The touch bar is glitchy and unreliable, and yes, I know it's fun and cool to have a touch bar on your Mac because then you can flex to your friends that you have the expensive model, but let's be honest, it's not going to be as practical as function keys. And then there's the marketing waffle because the speakers on the Pro have HDR. How can speakers have HDR? I have no clue, and yeah, you probably won't tell much of a difference between the Air speakers and the Pro speakers. The same waffle is applied to the Pro's mic system. Apparently it's studio quality, but I don't think that's the case, and again, you probably won't notice much of a difference in terms of mic quality between the Air and the Pro. Battery life is probably the only substantial upgrade you get with the MacBook Pro, so you get 20 hours of video playback on the Pro compared to 18 hours on the Air. But if you think about it, because M1 is such a huge upgrade over the older Intel chips, the Air's battery life is still 50% better than its predecessor. So this is still going to be more than fine for what most people need in a laptop. So yeah, that's pretty much it in terms of upgrades on the MacBook Pro, and yeah, I think I've kind of illustrated to you guys that it isn't a huge upgrade over the Air, and I do think it doesn't make sense to have 2 13-inch laptops in the lineup with near identical hardware. And so, what should Apple do to fix this? Well, they could take 2 routes. One seems a little more likely to me than the other, but I'll delve into both. So the first unlikely route Apple can take is killing the MacBook Air. Now, I don't see this happening because, as I said before, the MacBook Air is a very, very, very popular Mac. It's beloved by many people and the brand is very powerful, so I don't see Apple getting rid of the Air brand anytime soon. But I'm mentioning this because before the M1 launch, we had some pretty solid rumors regarding a revamped 12-inch MacBook, the 12-inch MacBook that was introduced in 2015 and then shortly killed after because it was severely underpowered. Apparently, Apple were planning to revamp that with Apple Silicon. Now, weirdly enough, that was supposed to be the first Apple Silicon Mac to launch, but obviously that didn't end up happening. So maybe Apple's planning to launch that sometime in the near future to replace the Air. And if Apple did that, that would make a lot of sense because the 12-inch form factor is not for everybody. Some people like bigger laptops, some people like the 13-inch size, and so that would upsell people to the Pro. But again, as I said, the Air is a very popular machine, so I don't see Apple killing off the Air to replace it with a 12-inch MacBook. And so the more obvious route for Apple to take is, of course, the title of this video, killing the base MacBook Pro. So essentially, the MacBook Air with the M1 chip is a MacBook Air on steroids because it can now comfortably fill the void of the base MacBook Pro, and instead Apple can focus on the 14-inch MacBook Pro we've always wanted. Like, honestly, the fact we have two tiers of the MacBook Pro, one with 2 ports in the M1 chip and one with 4 ports in Intel, is very, very confusing. And honestly, Apple should just merge both of these lineups up, give us the M1X chip just so it's slightly faster than the MacBook Air and so warrants a slightly higher price, but also give us 4 ports as standard because this is a Pro machine and Pros need as many ports as they can get. Obviously, the current 4-port MacBook Pro is around £1,800 here in the UK, so I'm assuming the 14-inch will be very similar in price. Maybe they drop it down to £1,600, but I think it will stay at a pretty high price, and I think that makes sense because now, as I said, the MacBook Air is the entry-level Mac. There doesn't need to be 2 options, especially at the same size. Just give the people the MacBook Air. That's pretty much all they need. And then the MacBook Pro can become the real Pro machine built for the pros without any compromises. So yeah, that's pretty much what I think, but let me know in the comments below, what do you guys think of this whole kerfuffle? And on that note, I'm gonna end it here. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, click that bell notification, and also check out another M1 video I made in the iCard above, and I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya, peeps.